Good evening, everyone. We're so happy you're here with us, and welcome to Health Matters. I'm your host, Victoria Venkatraman, and I'm so excited to be here with you all this evening. Health Matters is a public webinar series by Prodrome Science. In this series, Dr. Goodnow and I will discuss different health topics with the goal of improving access and awareness of science-based information to help improve health and well-being. Tonight's topic is unraveling the mysteries of multiple sclerosis. Many of us are probably somewhat familiar with multiple sclerosis, or MS, or perhaps you've heard of someone or know someone who's been diagnosed. But many of us don't know exactly what it means or how it's caused. On this evening's webinar, we will answer some of the following questions. What is MS? Why and how does MS affect neurological function? How do you know if you have MS? What can you do to restore the health of your nervous system? And how do you maintain optimal function? If you like what you hear this evening, please be sure to join us next month on April 3rd, where we will be covering autism in honor of Autism Awareness Month. Go to prodrome.com for all of the details. Before we jump into today's webinar, just a few housekeeping items are in order. First, this is a public webinar. It is open to everyone, and we welcome everyone. Second, the format is conversational. While detailed and specific scientific and medical content will be discussed and explained as best as we can, this is not a scientific or medical lecture. You should always consult your doctor or health professional before incorporating anything new into your health plan. 3. Each month, Dr. Goodnow presents a detailed lecture at his Advanced Practitioner Roundtable. At the end of the lecture, he moderates an open discussion forum for different healthcare practitioners, including case studies. This month will also be on MS and will take place on Wednesday, March 27th. Also this month, he will be announcing the special MS Challenge for Prodrome practitioners. If you are a healthcare practitioner and are interested in being a part of the roundtable, please contact customer service at prodrome.com. Everyone is encouraged to submit questions and share your experience in the chat section. Time is limited, so only selected questions will be answered live by Dr. Goodnow at the end of the webinar. The Prodrome Science customer service team will make every effort to either answer questions or direct you to a Prodrome practitioner who can assist you. Stay tuned at the end of the webinar, where we will be offering an exclusive discount code for webinar attendees. Lastly, this webinar and the content we speak about has not been evaluated by the FDA, and this conversation and the information we share is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. So let's get started. I'm so happy to see so many of you here this evening gathered with a shared interest in learning more about MS. Whether you are here to restore your own health or provide support for a loved one who may be living with MS, we hope that the information in our webinar will shed some light on this very complex disease. Before we dive into the biochemistry, let's take a moment to understand the public health landscape surrounding MS. Globally, the prevalence of MS is very significant, with estimates indicating that over 2.8 million people are affected by this condition. Within the United States alone, approximately 1 million individuals are diagnosed with MS, and the numbers are increasing. Multiple sclerosis, or MS, poses significant challenges to various systems within the body, primarily affecting the central nervous system. In MS, the immune system mistakenly attacks the protective covering of nerve fibers called myelin, leading to inflammation, demyelination, and damage to nerve fibers. As a result, MS can impact cognitive function, mental health, and mobility. Something I found in my research that we'll be sure to dive in later is that MS affects more women than men. Studies consistently show that women are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop MS than compared to men. It's a very complicated disease, and it's essential for individuals with MS to work closely with their healthcare providers to develop a personalized treatment plan tailored to specific needs, disease course, and preferences. Now it's time to introduce our expert guest, Dr. Dan Goodnow. Dr. Goodnow is the founder of Prodrome Science and author of Breaking Alzheimer's. He has 19 patents and is the inventor of advanced technologies, including comprehensive biochemical analyses. He has a PhD in psychiatry, where he studied the neurochemistry of the brain. Plasmalogens, which he is the only company with Prodrome Science to have a plasmalogen supplement on the market, are very successful for brain health. In fact, 30% of phospholipids of the brain are made of these plasmalogens. I met Dr. Goodnow during a trial with the team at the Regenesis Project. During this trial, we showed that using his breakthrough plasmalogen solution, we were able to reverse cognitive decline in 41% of our participants and improve mobility in almost all of them. Dr. Goodnow is also the inventor of the Prodrome Scan blood test, which can be ordered from a Prodrome certified practitioner, and he has over 2,000 doctors in this network. I know a lot of you listening may have MS or know someone who does and are looking for ways to restore health. And I have heard some incredible stories from Dr. Goodnow and his practitioners. After our discussion, I will share a testimonial from an MS patient in his network. Welcome, Dr. Goodnow, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Victoria. It's a pleasure to be here, chat with you.
I did a lot of research and was looking into MS, and it seems to manifest differently for everyone who has it. It seems to be very complex, and would love to just hear, your perspective back from the beginning. What is MS?
So multiple sclerosis is, as the name describes, multiple types of scleroses. So sclerosis is basically a scab or a scar. Okay, and so when you look at, it's an inflammatory disease that affects the white matter of the body, preferentially in the brain. And it's multiple because you get these multiple little lesions. So these little spots that show up, and when you look at the brain on advanced technology, like a magnetic resonance imagery system, it measures different types of brain structure, like the myelin, which is the white matter, neurological structure, which is the gray matter. And when you're looking at white matter, these little spots called hyperintensity show up. And they're random, and they are not unilateral. So you'll have some on one side of the brain, some on the other side of the brain. And so you have these multiple scars. So therefore, the phrase is multiple sclerosis. And typically, that's fundamentally what it is. It's an inflammatory disease that preferentially affects the white matter at the beginning. And as the disease progresses, it goes beyond just the white matter, and then the gray matter issues, like the synaptic function gets affected as well.
So how is it? So is it typically diagnosed by seeing these lesions on the brain in an MRI, these sclerosis? So that's, someone would maybe experience symptoms, get an MRI, and that's how they'd be diagnosed.
Like the MRI basically confirms. So basically what happens, it mostly affects women between ages of 20 and 40 is when it typically hits most women, okay? And people will just notice something's wrong, okay? Their balance will be off. They'll often have vision issues. They'll see double vision or a blurred vision. They'll find that they will have one hand versus another hand lose strength or muscle strength. Or one of their feet might start dropping, for example. They might get a drop foot. So they know something is wrong. Something neurologically is not right. And so they'll go in for further testing so people can look at nerve conductivity. There's other neurological tests people will perform. And then typically when someone has the first bout of attack, right, a bout of symptoms, it's called clinically isolated syndrome. And at that stage, we don't know whether or not this is just a one-time thing, like a hangover type of thing. Like, is there some sort of acute inflammatory event that's caused this neurological issue? Or is this going to be a continuing event? So most people with MS will have what's called clinically isolated syndrome, like an initial event, that when they get a secondary event, typically then they really think it's multiple sclerosis. But fundamentally, the MRI is what's used to validate it. So when you go into an MRI and look at that, you'll actually see spots on the MRI, and that spot will correspond to the neurological dysfunction that the person is experiencing.
So, as you just said, MS is it's a central nervous system disease, or a disease that impairs your neurological function. So, talk to us about what a properly functioning neurological system, how does that work?
Yeah, it's interesting. So when you think about it, right, you're taking a 20, 30, 40-year-old woman who has developed normally, could be a pianist, could be an athlete, could be obviously clearly healthy, functioning neurological individual, right? And so the question is that gets damaged. And the way the neurological system works, we think about it as it's a wiring system. And it's no different than the wiring in your house in the wall, right? So you'll have a wire that passes from your light switch to the light bulb. And as you turn the switch on and off, electricity goes through that wire. It doesn't turn your walls on fire because the wire is protected with a coating, a plastic coating called insulation. Your brain works the same way, and your peripheral neuron system works the same way. But instead of a plastic coating on a copper wire, what we have is an actual living cell. And in the brain, that cell is called an oligodendrocyte, and it wraps myelin around that wire so that you can have 5, 10 wires or 1,000,000 wires next to each other. And each of those wires can individually pass a signal from point A to point B. Then it needs to get from one end to the other end. And so what happens in MS, basically you get a mouse in the wall, starts chewing on the wires. And so all of a sudden the electrical impulse doesn't actually make it all the way, or it gets slowed down, or it gets disrupted in that process. And then that's when you feel the neurological issue where the connectivity between what you're trying to do and what you're actually doing just doesn't add up.
So what is white matter and what is gray matter? You talk about those two things. I get that was a great analogy with the wiring and the coating around the wiring. So is the white matter is the coating around the wiring?
Exactly. See, and a lot of people don't give white matter the credit it deserves. They think it's a bunch of mush, right? They think, okay, I'm taking some silly putty and I'm just squishing it around a neuron, which is the axon, which is inside the copper wire. But it's much more sophisticated than that. Our white matter really drives our neurological development, and it starts at birth. It actually starts about a month, about a month before birth, 1 or 2 months before birth. So when we're born with very little white matter. So an adult human brain, if you take a look at the brain, about 60% of the brain is white matter, which is this myelin. But when you're born, you virtually have no white matter. Maybe 5% of your brain is white matter. So from birth to a little later on, all that white matter gets built in your body. And so you think about a little baby trying to pick up a fork, trying to walk, trying to get balance, trying to think. All of those neurodevelopmental stages occur because the neurons become myelinated. And so as we develop from childbirth all the way up to, and our brains continue to myelinate. So learning and myelination go hand in hand, or neuromuscular performance. Like if you're an athlete getting better, or you're a pianist, any kind of precise neurological muscular movement requires precise neurological signaling, and the precision of that neurological signaling is dependent upon the ability of one signal to get from point A to point B. So now what happens in MS is that all that neurodevelopment of the person has happened normally, right? They've grown up, they've learned how to use a fork, okay, they know how to walk, all that stuff is working, and all that wiring has been put in place, right? So all that wiring has been laid down, and how the myelination occurs is that these cells that myelinate these axons, these oligodendrocytes in your brain and your Schwann cells in your periphery, they're stimulated by the electrical current in the axon, okay, in the wire. So when you first find out that you can move this finger without moving this finger, okay, there's a signal that happens, and then there's a connection, like an old telephone connection, right? And then that electricity is in the wire, and that electricity says to the oligodendrocytes, "Oh, there's something going on here," and it starts wrapping it so that it isolates that electrical signal from the next one. And so
otherwise, it's like all these instruments playing at the same time, and you can't isolate anything or clearly. So the white matter helps with precision.
Correct. So when you have
the coding helps with precision.
Exactly. So when you have this diffuse dysmyelination, that's what happens with an autistic child. Okay, what happens with children with autism is that myelination process gets impaired, or it gets reduced, or it's fuzzy, and so they have a hard time isolating signals. They can't really feel love from their parents. They can't really interpret these interactions properly because they can't isolate these feelings from each other. Now that doesn't happen in MS. So in MS, fast forward to 20, 30, 40 years, all that's in place. So now what happens is you get some sort of inflammation that starts eating at that white matter wiring. And now whatever was going on okay, that you've been used to, that you've been trained to do, all of that neurological training becomes disrupted. And in the multiple sclerosis, where it's random, because no one can predict where the lesion will occur in an individual. That's the randomness of it.
When you had mentioned that white matter doesn't get enough credit, I'm with you. Seems super, super important, both from just a neurodevelopmental level, but also white matter is kind of the key area that's affected with MS, and it manifests as, balance
Well,
issues, vision, so many
exactly.
different things.
And it's a huge reservoir. It's actually, we store a lot of our plasmalogens. You mentioned that earlier. We store them in our white matter. So people with MS, they have an increased risk of stroke. They have an increased risk of other white matter diseases because they have a white matter weakness, if you will. Okay, other white matter related diseases have a higher level of prevalence in those individuals, and they end up with less of a reserve capacity later on. So when we talk about cognitive reserve in the elderly for Alzheimer's and dementia, a lot of that cognitive reserve is white matter reserve.
Wow. And so with MS, not everyone gets it. So what are the characteristics, or are they environmental factors? Is it genetic? Why do some people get MS and some people don't?
So multiple sclerosis is fundamentally a mitochondrial insufficiency disease. And so it's maternally transmitted for the most part. And so it takes two components. One, you'll have what is the severity of your susceptibility. Kind of like it's a hard sentence to speak out loud. But so you have some level of mitochondrial weakness. Okay. Basically, you have some level of baldness on your tires. Then you are exposed to a living environment. And that environment could be very low inflammatory, it could be gentle. So you could live all life with a bald tire and never even know it, because you never experienced a circumstance where you needed, thick wires, thick tires. But then an exasperating trigger can occur. And if you have the level of the insult, if it's high enough, it can overcome your underlying features. And so the susceptibility is your mitochondrial sufficiency. And so when you talk about multiple sclerosis in the peak years, like age 20 to 40, there's really two types of initial MS. There's the relapsing remitting kind, and that's the one that's predominantly found in women, right? 2 to 3 times more women will get the relapsing remitting phase versus men. But there's another phase called primary progressive. And so relapsing remitting means exactly this. So a relapse is when you have symptoms. So you have the symptoms of MS. And then those last for a temporary period of time. And then you go into a remission. And when you go into remission, you can get complete restoration of function. Like all of your functions can come back. So that's a real critical component for people to understand. That means that myelination that is being digested during your relapse, your oligodendrocytes and your Schwann cells, they're rebuilding it during your remitting phase. If they weren't rebuilding it, you would never get back to normal, or even a restorative part of normal. So what happens when you get an early relapse or mild symptoms, that coating gets eaten away, but the wire inside it doesn't get completely damaged.
And you can rebuild that coating.
Exactly, because it's a cell, it's a living cell, it's an oligodendrocyte or a Schwann cell. Its job is to remyelinate. So that process, so the demyelination, remyelination goes back and forth. But in primary progressive, which happens equally in men and women, so there's no gender bias in primary progressive. This is a disease where someone gets a symptom and then it doesn't have any remission phase. Okay, it's a continuous decline phase. And of course, that decline phase can be slow or rapid. Okay, so that's where there's no gender bias there. Now, back to the most prevalent version of multiple sclerosis, which is relapse remitting. So that most occurs in women. Most women who have MS will notice that there's a relationship between their estrus cycles. So if they're pregnant, often they'll have best remission during those periods of life. And from a relapse remitting phase to secondary progressive. So secondary progressive is when there's no more remissions. There's only continual decline. And over a 10-year period, about half of MS people will transition from relapse remitting to secondary progressive. Wow. Within about 20 years, almost 100% of women with MS become secondary progressive. And that
So,
secondary progressive phase correlates a lot with their menopause.
so when women are more likely to get MS, does this have to do with hormonal differences from men then, especially if it's changing throughout
Absolutely.
their
So,
their stages of life? Yeah.
so basically MS and autism are exactly the same disease. But they affect two different genders at two different stages of their development. So you take a look at boys and girls aged 1 to 5. Okay, the brain is actively in the myelination state. And an equal number of boys will have mitochondrial insufficiency, and an equal number of girls will have mitochondrial insufficiency during those periods of time. But girls have beta estradiol, which is a very potent neuroprotective agent. So if you put the same level of inflammatory stress on boys and girls when they're young, girls are more resilient. They're healthier. They're more strong when we're young. So that's why the same level of environmental stress being exposed to both girls and boys, you're going to get a higher prevalence of autism in boys. Now, as time goes forward, boys don't have the crutch of beta estradiol. They don't have that extra protective mechanism. So they adapt to not having beta estradiol. But females have that extra crutch called beta estradiol. And then you fast forward to your 20s, 30s, and 40s, and then you can have periods of time when that crutch is taken away from you. Okay, so for whatever reason, you might have a hormonal imbalance, you might have low estrus, these situations. So then when you lose that protection, you become susceptible. Whereas men can't lose the protection because they never ever had it in the first place. And as that progresses, as women age, their beta estradiol protective mechanisms get less. And you can see this not just in MS. You can see this in heart disease and other diseases. A lot of the gender differences in diseases disappear post-menopause. Women start looking like men in terms of a health risk profile post-menopause.
So interesting that the role of hormones and how they protect in some ways, and also how they change over the lifespan of a person, their levels change too.
Right.
So back to what you had said though, okay, so there about the underlying root cause of MS being mitochondrial insufficiency. You've been mentioning these two cell types, so correct me if I get them wrong, but oligodendrocytes and Schwann cells. So is it the mitochondrial insufficiency of those two cells that's the root cause of MS? And what do those cells, what do they do? Do they make this myelin?
That's all they do. That's their job in life, is to make myelin, right? And so mostly for MS, it's going to be central nervous system. So it's going to be the oligodendrocytes. So there's peripheral neuropathy diseases that will have more of a Schwann cell component to it.
Okay.
But they're very similar to each other. They're just sizes and morphology are a little bit different.
And so when we say mitochondrial insufficiency, that's an energy production. So the oligodendrocytes, their job is to make myelin. Their
Correct.
job is to insulate the wires of the brain, which helps your body with signal, like precision and isolating, different things. So
They're
these
little
cells,
they're
they
basically
can't make the myelin because they don't have energy.
They're little electricians with a roll of electrical tape in their hands, and their job is to wrap this electrical tape around your axons. And they wrap it tight and thick. That's their job. And so and you're going to have insults. You're going to have inflammation all day long. Like you're going to have, you're going to get a hit on the head. You're going to get some sort of inflammatory event. So your brain and your neurological system has adaptation capabilities. And so the question is the level of recovery that you can do from an insult. So yeah, that's exactly what these things do. So when people look it up online, they're going to say, oh, it's an autoimmune disease. Okay, multiple sclerosis is when your immune cells attack your myelin, which is basically attacking your oligodendrocytes. Okay, that's what it's doing. And it's called autoimmune because they're not supposed to be attacking your own cells. They're supposed to be attacking other cells. But that's actually not really the truth. Your immune systems do attack your own cells. They're designed to do that. So your immune system is designed to seek out damaged cells in your body. Because if you have damaged cells and they're allowed to stay, a damaged cell can't perform its function properly. So your immune system is actually designed not to just look for, foreign bacteria and viruses and so on and so forth. It's also designed to look at your own cells when they become dysfunctional. And then otherwise you'd have cancer. Everyone would have cancer if your immune system didn't take out your bad cells. Okay, for example. So your immune system is designed to look at your own cells when they become dysfunctional. And when it finds a dysfunctional cell, it does attack your own cell, kill that cell, and that allows space for a brand new healthy cell to grow in its place. And so that's what happens in MS is that when a cell becomes unhealthy due to mitochondrial insufficiency, there's some sort of stressor, inflammatory stress. It's putting a stress on this oligodendrocyte. The oligodendrocyte can no longer sustain its job, which is to make the myelin sheath, and it becomes stressed. And the stress causes the leakage, basically, of reactive oxygen species. And the part of the cell that does that is your mitochondria. That's your energy generating organelle. And these reactive oxygen species leak out of the cell and they oxidize the outer membrane of the cell, just like rust, basically, okay? And that is the trigger to your immune system. So when your membranes become oxidized, that is what triggers your immune system that says, hey, something is wrong in this cell. I better go over here and better clean up this mess, right? And so when you have weakened mitochondria, just a small amount of inflammatory stress can overwhelm the oligodendrocyte, create this reactive oxygen species, create these peroxidized membranes, and the immune system wakes up and says, oh, something's going on here. I better come over here and fix this. And then what happens is they're weakened. So then the immune system comes. In the brain, it's called your microglial cells, is what the actual cells are. They come into the brain, they attack the cell, but the immune system is quite aggressive, if you will. And normally the cells around the insult are able to sustain the microglia. So the microglia only damage the cell they're trying to. But if you have other weakness, the surrounding cells now become damaged by the immune response. And it burns out like a forest fire. So if you actually look at time course studies of the MS lesion, it's quite, it's scary if you have MS, because it's interesting as a scientist, but it's actually flat out scary to look at it, because it starts in center and it builds outwards. It kind of burns out, like you can imagine a forest fire burning outwards in the lesion. And then the macrophages, which is the immune systems, they around the outside edges. And then what happens when you go into the remitting phase is sooner or later the fire burns out and there's a hole, basically. And then the macrophages, they eventually dissipate. They go away. And once they're gone, then your brain starts to remyelinate. These are called oligodendrocyte progenitor cells, actually. They come in and start remyelinating. So that's a remyelinating phase. And that'll go on if possible. But when you get too weakened, those lesions don't fill back in during the remitting phase. And then you get a permanent lesion in the brain. And so you'll have these little micro lesions and you'll have these bigger permanent lesions. And so that's the bottom line.
The relapsing and remitting that you speak about, to me, shows that it's possible to remyelinate the brain. Like the body inherently knows how to rebuild. But with people who are experiencing these symptoms or who have MS, and it's not, going away or coming in phases, that's because it's just the inflammation is so bad that the body just isn't able, to recover. So how does someone restore their central nervous system or their neurological health, especially if there's a lot of inflammation in their white matter? What's the process like?
Yeah, so it's really being able to enable those oligodendrocytes to do their job. Okay, that's fundamentally what it is. It's basically restoring the system to its original manufacturing specifications. It's quite straightforward. I know it sounds goofy, but really that's what it's all about. And so what you have in MS is that the degradation rate is higher than your remyelination rate. Mm-hmm. And so in order to actually restore that function, we have to rebuild from scratch. And the best analogy to think about MS is it's like you have had a house fire, big burning house, you got a hole in your roof, you had a fire in your hole in the roof, right? And who's going to fix this house for you? And you can't fix it yourself. It's a carpenter that fixes your house. Well, say your carpenter has a broken arm, which is what we have in multiple sclerosis. The mitochondria is critical for the restoring process, but it's got a broken arm. So you can have a carpenter with a broken arm, he can't fix your house. You can give him all the building material and he can't fix your house. So the first thing you got to do is you got to fix the broken arm. You got to fix the ability of the carpenter to rebuild the house. Then you got to provide the carpenter with the building materials to actually build the house. So you have to have the working carpenter, and you have to provide the physical material to rebuild the house. And then once the house has been fixed, then you got to start reusing it, because if you don't use it, you need to go live in it. And so the phases of restoring health is understanding the mitochondrial insufficiency, providing the oligodendrocytes with the actual building material, which is plasmalogens, phosphatidylcholine, cholesterol restoration capabilities. And then if you do that, the inflammation will go away. So you kind of have to unwind it. So we definitely, first you want to resolve that inflammation. And resolving the inflammation from a biochemical perspective is removing the inflammatory triggers. Okay, you need to remove the peroxidized membrane components, because that's what's causing the inflammation cascade to begin.
Yeah, so put out the fire.
Exactly. You got to put out the triggering event. And the biggest thing to do that's where the plasmalogens come in. It's just physical bulk membrane material. It comes in and it's basically putting, you're slapping on new membranes. And so that removes the inflammation component. And then you have to restore the underlying aspect of it. So those are basically the three phases of any things is restoring the functionality. Then you need to rebuild what's been lost. And finally, you got to use what's been rebuilt. And that's the process when you're 30 years old and you lose function, lose a lesion, lose some neurological structure. You're basically, that localized system has been reset to when you're 6 months of age, right? It has to start all over from scratch again. Now, the good news is some of the tracks, like your muscle fibers and your other neuron fibers, provide some sort of guidance for that regeneration or neurogenesis pathway. So you're not quite in the same spot, but then also you don't have quite the neurogenesis robustness of a 12-month-old baby. So
yeah. Well, this is super fascinating. I love how you really it's all about restoring health. We're not talking about symptoms of the disease. We're talking about how do you restore health? And when you restore health, the body, like you said, restoring it to the manufacturer's specifications, or, once you restore health, the body is able to remyelinate the brain. It just needs the materials. And it seems like with MS, they kind of many people are maybe genetically predisposed to not have quite as much. They have that mitochondrial insufficiency in their white matter, so they don't have a lot of backup reserves to remyelinate. So through proper supplementation and work with your doctor, it is possible to give your body the materials it needs to heal itself. And I love how it's this layered approach of mitochondrial support, because if those cells don't have the energy to do their job, they can't do their job. So the first thing is the mitochondrial support. And then the second is giving those cells the raw material to rebuild. It's kind of like you said, a layered approach.
Exactly. Well, you take it one step further. The mitochondria is basically is feeding the carpenter. The peroxisomes and some other parts of your cell, they're actually making the myelin. The mitochondria is providing the energy to do that, and reducing all the oxidative stress to do that. No, that's exactly right. And the only way myelin can get restored is the oligodendrocyte has to do it. You can't do it for the oligodendrocyte. Like, you can't physically come in there and just inject myelin onto your neurons, because it's a wrapping. So if you want to remyelinate, somehow or other, you have to create the circumstances that oligodendrocyte can actually do its job, can it do the remyelination. Now you want to pull away anything that's preventing it. So that's why some of the conventional therapies, what they do is they try to stop all the inflammatory cascade. They try to kill off the immune system and says, okay, if I can just kill the immune system, maybe I can give my oligodendrocytes enough breathing room. Okay, so just give them enough breathing room to start catching up a little bit, but they're not really helping the problem, which is, dealing with the actual endogenous biochemical capacity of those oligodendrocytes to do their job under the circumstances that they're being asked to do it in.
And so a proper protocol would include both mitochondrial support and membrane support.
Yeah, absolutely. There's 3 or 4 core components. The number one is the membranes itself, right? So first, physically, what is the actual plywood and 2x4s that you need to build the myelin with. And the plywood and the 2x4s are the plasmalogen precursors, phosphatidylcholine, cholesterol. That's the physical, actual building material that goes in those membranes. That's what the myelin is actually made of. Then you have to deal with the operating system. So the mitochondrial function, the big buffer zones are N-acetylcysteine, which restores your glutathione level. So people with MS will historically have low levels of glutathione, peripherally, but also in the brain. Acetyl L-carnitine has also been well studied in multiple sclerosis. It improves energy, but it improves the mitochondrial capacity to do things. It expands this. It's the acetyl-CoA. It allows that capability to grow. Coenzyme 10. Your basic B vitamins, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, those are the core ones. There's some alpha lipoic acid, and there's other things you can do, but those are the biggies. And then there's a big component called methyltransferase. Elevated homocysteine is another common biomarker in MS. Elevated homocysteine, elevated malondialdehyde, which is the oxidative stress. That's the oxidative stress marker for lipids. So the methyltransferase system is the phosphatidylcholine, creatine, B12, methylfolate, that kind of stuff, betaine. Those are all providing the building material. Now, the next step is, so those are all the things that enable the oligodendrocyte to myelinate. The next thing is, the other part is that you have to actually entice it. Okay, you have to stimulate the oligodendrocytes to make the myelin. And what stimulates the oligodendrocyte to make the myelin is an electrical signal in the axon. If there's no electrical signal in the axon, the oligodendrocytes will not be stimulated to make the myelin. And so this is where the physiotherapy comes in. And this is where the omega-3 plasmalogens come in. So the DHA plasmalogens are involved in the synaptic.
Prodrome neuro, right?
Prodrome neuro. And so this deals with the synaptic. You need to turn the wires on, right? Because you need to stimulate the electrical signal in the wiring, because that's also what creates the neurogenesis. It creates the neurons being able to find their path. They can't find their path if we don't turn them on. And once you get electrical signal back in the axon, it stimulates the oligodendrocytes to start the remyelination process. So that's the combination approach in MS.
Membrane support, energy support, mitochondrial support. So I have a testimonial from a patient who was on a protocol that included some of your products. And when I reached out to her, I asked her for a testimonial, and I said, "We'll keep it anonymous." And she said, "No, you can use my name. I'm so proud of how far I've come in my recovery." And I thought that was just really, really sweet and impactful. So this wonderful woman, her name is Lisa, and her message says, "Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa. I am 53 years old, and I was told I would have MS after experiencing optic neuritis when I was 21. I have been considered legally blind in my right eye for 32 years, and I've been unable to read words when I close my left eye. After suffering multiple attacks in 2007, I was officially diagnosed and put on DMT at that time. Over the years, I have never, ever been told that there was any hope or that my vision would improve. In April of 2023, Dr. Goodnow started me on a specific protocol, including plasmalogens. One day in December 2023, I noticed that I could read words on a regular page with my blind eye. This is amazing to me since I have never ever heard of anyone getting their vision back once they are considered legally blind from optic neuritis, especially after 32 years. I can also lift my weak right leg higher than at any time in the past few years, and I rely on daytime naps less than a couple of years ago. The positive changes in my MRI further support substantial incremental improvements that correspond with my daily findings. I am excited to see what 2024 holds as I continue working with Dr. Goodnow." So I thought that was absolutely amazing to hear someone who has so much excitement to see how much better they're going to get. I think that is just kind of a narrative that we don't see, especially with conditions like this. And she'd mentioned positive changes in her MRI. So obviously she's getting vision back in this eye where she hasn't been, seeing. She was legally or blind in that eye. She's lifting her weaker side muscles more and more than before. But from her daily life, that's what she's seeing. What did you see? How did this look on her brain scan?
Yeah, it's just amazing, Lisa is, and it's so rewarding to see things occur in reality versus
Yeah.
like we studied these plasmalogen precursors very extensively. The literature, animal models. We have animal models of demyelination. There's a model called Cooperzone. It's a copper chelator, and if you give animals this Cooperzone, it will cause demyelination. It causes MS in a very highly reproducible way. If we give these animals plasmalogens before we give them Cooperzone, there's no demyelination. It completely prevents any kind of white matter loss from the demyelinating toxin. And more importantly, if we give them Cooperzone and the brain starts to demyelinate in these animals, then halfway through actually being on an active demyelinating agent, we give them plasmalogens, the animals remyelinate while they're still under the stress of the demyelinating agent. It's very, very powerful stuff. And so now we talk about, in the real world now with humans, so we know this myelination can occur. We know we can remyelinate, we know we can restore function. And now translating from an animal to humans, what's nice about these supplements that we've developed or I've designed is that we've gone from, these are natural biochemical precursors. Okay, we're using endogenous, we're basically doing bioengineering. All we're doing is restoring and boosting the endogenous system. We're not adding anything external to the human body other than what's already there. Okay, we're plugging into the existing system. And so with Lisa, then of course we did this exact strategy. We did the plasmalogens, so the omega-9 plasmalogens. She took those at night and in the afternoon. She took the DHA, which is the omega-3 plasmalogens, in the morning and the afternoon, and then the mitochondrial support like N-acetylcysteine, carnitine, and she was also on an anti-inflammatory curcuminoid. So we use a special curcuminoid called BDMC, which is bis-D-methoxycurcumin, and that has a very potent anti-inflammatory component, and that combination alone. So now we have tools now, like people think of MRI that as just this volumetric image of your brain, but it's so much more than that. We can actually look, we can probe into the structure and function of the brain. So for Lisa, we could see before and after, the vascularization of her brain got dramatically better. We use a technology called neurovascular coupling, and you could see the occipital lobes and those areas. So when we talk about vision, so when you're visual, you get your two eyes, and your optic nerves cross over, and then they're processed in the occipital cortex, which is crossways, and the nerves cross over what's called a optic chiasm. That structure of her brain doubled in size in 6 months. Okay, and so her occipital cortex grew. Okay, because your brain is incredibly adaptive. If there's no signal, so when there's no signal going through her optic nerve, it was like building muscle, right? If you don't lift weights, your muscles won't grow. Like if you just lay there, and your neurons work the same way, and your brain will actually grow and shrink based upon the functional demands put on it. And so we could see that using volumetrics, but also if you look at the structure. So as I was talking about the myelin wrapping, so those all get interstate do these wraps, and you can measure the quality of the wrapping by the thickness and whether or not how loose they are. And so her white matter got tighter and bigger. And so it's very, very clear that we can systematically and in a targeted way and objectively measure restoring brain structure and function. And I did that in my own brain. So I'm a 55-year-old guy. I have a protocol, and I was able to reduce 15 years of brain aging. We know so using plasmalogens, I was able to improve my occipital cortex volumes and other volumes of my brain and function. So it clearly says that the brain is an adaptable organ, and if we stimulate it and you feed it properly, it will grow and it will rejuvenate itself.
Yeah, it has the power to rebuild. I mean, with Lisa, you saw volumes increase, right? Like the brain was rebuilding.
Yeah, and what's nice about what's nice, that's a scientist talking to you. So MS is not unilateral. So you'll have lesions on one hemisphere versus the other hemisphere. And so you can do hemispheric comparisons, because as the brain heals, the two hemispheres should become closer and closer to each other, right? And And so we can start tracking, because the bigger lesions take a long time. They're really dead space in the brain. And so, but you can start trying to get remyelination from the outside in. But again, just like as I mentioned earlier, you have to get that, you need a neurological signal for the myelination to occur, that you can't myelinate without a signal, like without an axon, without an actual electrical signal in place, you can't myelinate. So if the lesions are too far advanced, then your brain doesn't like a vacuum, so it's going to try to use up the space it has. And so we'll try to continue. So that's exciting with Lisa as we go forward, how much additional progressive improvements we can see over time.
Absolutely. And so, do you have any of the products with you that she had used in the protocol?
So N-acetylcysteine, carnitine, CoQ10, those are molecules like, you get your favorite brand. Okay. These are around for the last 100 years. You can find we have them. So N-acetylcysteine, this is what she was taking, coenzyme Q10, acetyl L-carnitine, but you can find your favorite brand. These are not unique to anyone. There's no specialness in our space. We have a special curcuminoid, this BDMC curcuminoid, if I can turn this. So this is a special formulation. It's about 50 to 100 times more concentrated than a regular turmeric extract. And there's a reason for that. I won't get into great detail on that, but it's a very specialized high.
So that's the BDMC.
Yeah, BDMC.
And if someone has their own curcumin or turmeric, this is super powered version of that, but incorporating some sort of anti-inflammatory curcumin or turmeric.
So various forms of this you can find elsewhere. This curcuminoid is hard to find. We specially source that. But in terms of the plasmalogen precursors, like the prodrome glia, it's just an oil. Like it's an oil that looks like just clear oil. It's basically, it's not olive oil, but it's if you drop it in here, if I can do this, can't do this line, whatever it is. It's you warm it up. That's the prodrome glia. This is basically the active ingredient that's in human breast milk. Exactly. So this is why breastfed babies have better brain development than non-breastfed babies, is because of this molecule in here. And
that's the molecule that helps with white matter. That's the raw materials for white matter.
And then the DHA plasmalogens are this prodrome neural, right? And it comes in a liquid and a gel cap. Most people prefer the gel cap. Okay, this is what we're offering. Okay, because the gel cap, it looks like this, And what's nice
about the oil is inside the capsule.
Yeah. And what I like about them is that they're not very big. Okay. And so if you have swallowing issues, okay, you might need to take more of them, but at least they go down nice. Okay. But what we're showing to you for the very first time ever is a product called Prodrome Glia PC Plus. And this is something I've been struggling with for several years. And so it's getting an animal-based phosphocholine, which is what your brain needs. So Glia PC Plus takes the best of two worlds. It takes this plasmalogen omega-9 oil, okay? And it combines it with egg yolk oil. So we use egg yolk. What we do is we take fresh, frozen, freeze-dried egg yolks. We extract it with food-grade ethanol, and we pull out all of the fat-soluble vitamins, phosphatidylcholine, lipids out of the egg yolk. And then from that, so it's all sterilized, purified, all the proteins, all the allergens that could be in some people with food allergies with egg are removed in that process. And then we further enrich it with D-alpha tocopherol, which is vitamin E, but the good kind, coenzyme Q10, read it myself, vitamin D3 and vitamin K2. And so you end up with this formulation, and you're getting all of the lipid nutrition in egg yolks. So you're going to get the triglycerides, you're going to get the phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylethanolamin, and all of the fat-soluble vitamins that are also in an egg yolk oil. And it's pretty cool. I personally,
wow.
So this is what it looks like. And I typically take 15 mils of this a day. So it looks just like this. Okay. And it pours quite nicely. And basically, I take this in the morning. I just drink this stuff. It's actually, and what's good about this stuff is it's good for your skin and everything else as well. But it's
Wow.
it's
So it
actually good stuff.
has, it's PC,
Yep.
phosphatidylcholine, plus prodrome glia or
Yep.
omega-9 backbone plasmalogens.
Yep.
And it has
Vitamin E,
vitamin E.
vitamin D3, vitamin K2, and CoQ10. So all these fat
Wow.
soluble things are all in one. And then you can pick in a combination, you take your favorite, brand of N-acetylcysteine if you like, which is pretty straightforward stuff. And that's it. So what we're doing to off,
Wow.
for multiple sclerosis month, I don't know if I have stuff on my lips, is that
Got milk mustache, but with
but
prodrome.
these three products that you can't get anywhere else. Like the other stuff you can get anywhere you want to. We're offering 25% discount on the Glia PC Plus. Now it's very limited supply. We're just getting it, so it's
So
only going to
Lisa didn't take that product. This is
be
new.
yet. She's on it now though.
Hmm.
She just started a couple months ago.
This kind of puts together a lot of the products that people would typically be taking separately.
Well, we've been using this in our clinic. So we have a very advanced restorative health clinic in Canada that we treat people with ALS and late stage dementia. So we've been using this stuff in our clinic for about 6 to 8 months now. Dramatic recoveries in ALS and other things. So it's a core component of our hands-on strategy. This is the first time it's available to everybody. And of course, it's in limited supply, so we're only allowing it for two bottles per person until our supply chain improves. And we make everything personally ourselves. So this is not a white label product. This is actually physically made down the street in our own laboratories. Same thing with all of our products are actually made by us, by our own laboratories.
So if someone was vegan or allergic to eggs, it would be better for them to have the Glia oil.
Well, if you have a reason vegan wise, for allergies though, I would recommend just taking a small amount to test it out. But it should have very limited, if zero, allergenic issues, because all of the protein allergens in the sterilization process should remove that issue. But like always, be careful. Work with your practitioner with that. Take a small amount, but chances are that even if you have an egg sensitivity, chances are you're not going to be sensitive to this product. And then so these three products, the DHA plasmalogen, the omega-9 plasmalogen, and the PC Plus, Glia PC Plus, we're offering 25% off for people here. Part of the web.
Yeah, so the code is MS25. And if you enter that code on prodrome.com, you'll have the 25% off. Really exciting. Congratulations on that new product. That is really, really exciting.
It's a game changer. It really is a game changer because like our ALS patients, like we were getting improvement with the plasmalogens, and when we give them the egg yolk oil on top of that, they notice the difference. And it's about getting it in the brain, and it's a longer conversation with the doctor. The practitioners get that information as to the pharmacokinetics and how we deliver it past the blood-brain barrier. Like that's a much more detailed conversation that we like to talk to our doctors about. But everything we do has a reason for it.
Totally. So I think it's time. So MS25 is the code, everyone. We'll start to answer a couple of the questions in the Q&A, and all the questions we don't get to, someone from the Prodrome team, customer service, will be sure to reach out and do their best to answer your questions later. One of the first questions is, can you take Neuro, Glia, and BDMC in addition to the Glia PC? I'm already taking the first three. So basically, can people add the Glia PC into this, into their regimen if they're already taking Neuro and Glia, because they both have Glia?
Yeah, so once you can take the Glia to enrich higher levels of the omega-9. So you can kind of titrate for yourself. So we have children with rare demyelinating diseases, and they take very high levels of these plasminogens. So children with leukodystrophies and so on. And so really the PC Plus, the Glia PC and the Glia oil are really interchangeable. Clearly the Glia PC Plus is a superior product. It's got more in it. But It may not be for everybody. So we want to make sure that the Glia oil is one of the purest things that you can have on it. Like if you look at the ingredients, like when it says other ingredients, you can't read that, but other ingredients, it says none. Like there's nothing, that this is just pure oil. Like there's no additives and nothing in it. Like, so if you're worried about food sensitivity issues or any kind of, if you got a hypersensitivity, this is, and it's bulletproof. Like you can cook with it, you can put it in anything you like to. It's not going to just be destroyed. It's like it's a plasmalogen version of olive oil, if you will. Okay, it has a plasmalogen backbone. Of course, olive oil does not have any plasmalogen in it, so it's very good.
Thank you. Will we be able to access the recording after? Yes. A link will be sent out to all of the participants after, and you can rewatch the video then. There was a question if Prodrome BDMC is the same as Prodrome GTA. Is it a new name or a new product or both?
Yes, it's the same product. So the reason why we sourced the BDMC in the first place, because in our advanced blood testing on the Prodrome scan, we have a section on the Prodrome scan called gastrointestinal tract acids. These are molecules made by your gut microbiome, and when they're low, they're associated with increased risk of certain cancers. And they have a very potent biological activity, and they're anti-cancer, anti-inflammatories. And there isn't a really highly reproducible way of elevating your own natural GTA levels. One type of molecule in our environment that has virtually identical biological activity to those endogenous GTAs is BDMC. And so when we first launched the BDMC product, it was linked to the GTA. So we called it Prodrome GTA because that's what it was like. But we've changed the brand label to BDMC just because it's more technically accurate, less confusing for people. So that's.
But it's the same, and people know the GTA. It's the same product.
Same product.
And someone asked if a 4-year-old can use these supplements.
Absolutely. So our rare disease program. So we have a very we have a very aggressive charity. Children with rhizomelic chondrodysplasia punctata, X-linked adrenal leukodystrophies, other leukodystrophies, some mitochondrial dysfunctions, Rett syndrome, Canavan's disease. So we have a charity for children with rare diseases that we offer all of our products for free, and we do a lot of work for them. And so so we have lots of children on the supplements and the actual egg yolk oil. And I know in the autism community, we have a large community of people using the Glia oil and Glia capsules in autism, and they've all been anxiously waiting for this Glia PC product. And it's taken us a little longer than we wanted to get it available to them because, we talk about it and we have it for our special cases and for our clinic because we just had limited supply. And so now this is the first time we've been, so long answer to your question. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, it's great. And like I said, it blends with things like it's egg yolk oil. So if you put it with your waffles, like it'll make it, you can make a smoothie with it. If you want to make a smoothie with it.
You can use it as a base.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Really interesting. I can't wait to try that one. I think we have time for one more question. I think a question I'm seeing in a variety of ways. And obviously, we want people to work with their physician on this, but I know the capsules are small and people are kind of asking how much plasmalogen should they be taking? What's the therapeutic dose for MS? So what was maybe like Lisa or past patients when working with their doctors, is there an amount that seemed to work best?
Yeah, so I think Lisa was on, I quote myself on this, I think she's on between 6 and 8 gel caps of the Glia at night.
But work up to that, right?
Yeah, it doesn't take very long. You just want to make sure. And then she was on 6 or so neuros in the morning. Then at lunchtime, she took 4 and 4. So when you have a neurological disorder, we go to higher doses, and we've gone even higher doses with ALS patients. So that's what she was taking. And then she was taking N-acetylcysteine. I think she was taking 2 capsules twice a day, so 4 capsules. Those are 600 milligram capsules. And then acetyl L-carnitine, she was taking 4 capsules of that per day too, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, so about 2 grams. And a couple 100 milligrams of CoQ10. And then the BDMC, I can't remember, it was 4 capsules, 2 plus 2, or 2 plus 1, something like that. Either 3 or 4 capsules of the BDMC. That's what she was on for 6 months. So a very simple protocol for her. We have much more advanced protocols.
But it seems like
to be
the
honest,
key components.
to be honest with you, we started Lisa on that, and then I kind of forgot. I thought we were going to update. We were going to add some other things to it, and I thought we did, and we didn't. So she was actually on a very simple protocol for the 6 months.
And she saw some incredible improvements. So the key components that people can only get from Prodrome are the Prodrome Neuro, the Prodrome Glia, and the Prodrome BDMC. And this new product, which will be, it's brand new, so it should be live on the website by the end of the evening. If you don't see it now, it is hot off the press. You will be the first ones to try it. So really exciting. And thank you so much, Dr. Goodnow, for all of the work that you do. Hearing Lisa's story was such a powerful reminder to me of how you're able to really create some hope and show people that restoring health is possible.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And because we're just told over and over again, like, not to expect, any improvement. We're just trying to delay our outcomes or make it, slower. And so, it is possible, and we're seeing this on a quite regular basis now, in multiple systems. And it really is simple. We've kind of gotten to the point where we start ignoring disease, and we start just focusing on function. Let's just focus on the oligodendrocyte. How do we get the oligodendrocyte to do its job? Okay, what can I do to help the oligodendrocyte do its job? And if I can get that cell doing its job, then it's going to remyelinate, and it's going to do the things it's supposed to do, rather than trying to chase every symptom and every negative outcome. We're just focusing on restoring function. Restoring
health.
But I sound so simple. But obviously we're using strategically placed molecules for this. But conceptually, that's really all there is to it.
If you give your body what it needs to function, it knows what to do. We're just restoring health. Well, thank you so much for everything, your expertise, taking the time tonight, the incredible products you've engineered, and you have such an awesome team, I know, working with you to make this all happen. So thank you so much tonight. And if we didn't get to your question, customer service will reach out to you, or they've answered your question with an email that you can contact for more information. And we'll see you all next month, where we speak more about autism.
Thank you very much, Victoria.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month.